Hello folks, welcome to week 2 of NavSafety 1. Today I'm just going to be doing online video with a PowerPoint presentation running in the back just to aid you, to help give you a better understanding. Today we're going to be talking about rules 4, 5, and 6, and the way it's broken down is the rule itself, as stated in the collision regulations, is bolded and highlighted in black, and then underneath it is a general discussion. After we've completed this PowerPoint presentation and the video that goes along with it, then it's the same thing as last week. I got a little 10 multiple choice quiz also found under the week 2 folder in weekly learning. So let's get started. So first off, just to talk about, as you can see stated here, it's part B. We done part A. It's just called general. Okay, that was more or less where it applies and some general definitions. Okay, so right now this is the application is rule 4, lookout is rule 5, and safe speed is rule 6. And I want you to pay particular attention here. Conducts of vessels in any condition of visibility. Any condition of visibility that can be restricted or unrestricted. So although we're only talking about three rules today, I just want to start off by, I'm just going to read from this now. Rules 4 to 8, covering the conduct of vessels in any condition of visibility, emphasize what should be done to avoid the risk of collision, rather than dictating action to be taken once the risk exists. Basically, keep your eyes open would be a fair summary, but the regulations require rather more than simply glancing around the horizon from time to time to see what is around you. Okay, basically, if we go to the next rule here, the application, rules in this section apply to in any condition of visibility. Or to put it another way, the minute you go out on any water covered by the regulations, rules 5 to 10 apply regardless. We're going to talk a little bit further about some other rules where there are exemptions, one of them being restricted visibility and another one is overtaking. Don't worry about that right now. We'll talk about that in the next lesson. So rule 5, lookout. This rule is very important and very straightforward because if you are not looking out or doing a proper lookout, you'll never identify that there is a risk of collision and you'll never be able to use any of the other rules that you've learned. So it starts here by first looking out and identifying that there is a possible risk of collision. So the rule states every vessel shall at all times maintain a proper lookout by sight and hearing, as well as by all available means appropriate in the prevailing circumstances and conditions so as to make a full appraisal of the situation and risk of the collision. So let's break it down now. And what does all this mean? This all seems pretty straightforward enough, but there are several aspects to note, which apply particularly to modern ships. So for fast ships, the convenience of speed brings a need for greater alertness because of, we're going to talk about, all ships have different handling characteristics. So one of the biggest ones is the stopping speed. So for instance, a ship traveling at 20 knots will cover around 2,000 feet in a minute, leaving just 6 seconds to avoid an object sighted 200 feet away. So the need for a wide-awake officer of the watch is obvious, as it is the advantage of a second pair of eyes. Even a slower vessel traveling at 8 knots has only 15 seconds or so to avoid our theoretical obstruction of 200 feet distance. So I don't know if you've ever heard the term, never drive beyond your headlights. So what you're saying is if you're getting too close to a vessel, if you're traveling so fast that even if your headlights did detect the vessel in the car ahead of you, it's too late. You're going to have a collision. So it's the same thing that happens here. You got it, and this is only considering that you're the moving vessel. Put this in another situation where there's another vessel coming at you at 20 knots. So that distance gets cut in half. So when you are traveling at high speeds, just like when you're driving your car fast, you should always be alert, but you have to heighten your level of alertness. So good watch keeping is an art, which needs to be practiced, okay? So the big one here, what we're talking about, is judging distances and accurately assessing the size and relative course of other vessels is something which no amount of instruction or studying of text can cover or teach. It can be gained from experience. And you're going to see that. You're going to see that not only from identifying vessels off on the horizon, but when you're coming alongside of a dock and you're down there with one of the officers of the watch, either on the bow or on the stern, and the captain is calling down and he wants distances off that dock because he can't see it. You're down there. You're his eyes on. So one rule of thumb that I use for gauging distances, let's just say for approaching the dock. I know we've gone away from safely navigating the vessel in open water. But when you join a vessel, it's going to have a diagram of the ship. And that diagram is going to tell you how long it is and how wide it is. You should, as practice good seamanship, figure out how wide the back deck is. So when you're approaching, let's say you're on a vessel and it's 25 meters wide. When you're approaching a dock, you can sit back and think, okay, how many of my vessels can I fit between where I'm to now and the dock? If it's 1, then 25 meters. And that's a good starting point. If it's 1.5, then you can say 40 meters. So that's a good rule of thumb when docking. When you're out in open water, it's a little more trickier because you don't have any reference. You're out in the open water and there's nothing. It's just the horizon. There's nothing to gauge that distance off. So that will all come with experience, okay? So now we're going to talk about autopilot because they talk about all available means for using. So an autopilot can be a menace or a real help depending on how it's used. Left to its own devices with no one assigned to lookout duties, the result might be dramatic, as evidenced by trawlers which regularly kiss the side of anchored supertankers in clear visibility off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, or by there was once a dredger which neatly sliced the pier in two while the watch decided to go down below for a coffee break. So many people use this autopilot in the wrong way. They think that this autopilot is going to steer your ship, going to bring it into port, throw the lines ashore and tie it up for you, all while you're up doing something else. It's not true. It's just like any other piece of equipment. You have to really get a good understanding for it. And it's not only the autopilot, it's how the autopilot ties into the maneuvering characteristics of your vessel. Okay? If you don't have a highly maneuverable vessel, then you got to realize when you're setting up your autopilot and you go and you put in an automatic heading change, a big one, it's going to take a long time for that vessel to come around on its heading. So you're not just going to set the autopilot and walk away assuming that, okay, yeah, this computer program is going to do this thing, it's going to come around on its heading. While it's doing that, I'm going to go back and do some chart corrections. No. A practice of good seamanship is you stay and you watch until the heading change is complete. Most importantly, a proper lookout means one which takes the whole 360 panorama. Okay, you got to look behind you, especially if you're a slower ship. Okay, because there's going to be people coming up behind you. Think about on a fast highway. If you're on the 401 and you're doing lane changes. What if you never looked over your shoulder when you done one of those lane changes? How long do you think you would last on a busy highway like that? Okay? You have to assess the whole situation, the whole 360 degrees of the horizon, okay? So on slow-moving ships, the biggest danger often occurs from behind, where other ships can steal up surprisingly quickly. You may not have been sighted on the radar. You may not be easy to see if approaching a harbor with shore lights, masking your own navigation lights. So basically, your shore lights are blending in with the background lights of the harbor. Say if you're approaching, coming into Owen Sound Channel, you'd have to be careful there that your lights didn't get mixed up with the lights of downtown. You may, in addition, disappear altogether while still a long way off. If the other ship is a supertanker in ballast or a large container with its bridge sighted aft of its forward visibility is obstructed by the height of the bow, deck or gear or cargo. So they might not see you, right? You might be in their line of sight now in their blind spot. You are so small, they are so large that they can't detect you, okay? Here's another one. Not all bridges allow for unrestricted visibility. You might have blind spots, like a lot of the boats I go on. Because we're a construction vessel, we have these big, huge cranes. on the back of our vessel, and they're always working because we're always working. So you could have a vessel that's behind that. Just like I talked about in radar, the radar sending out that radio wave will get blocked by one of these obstructions. The same thing happens with your line of sight. So if Rule 5 were to be obeyed by the letter, it would be prudent to have one person on watch on the bridge wing to assist the officer to watch whose view is inhibited by a superstructure. When navigating at night, it is also vital to preserve night vision. So we talked about that. When the same effect that we get when you're driving a vehicle and someone high beams us, we lose that vision for a while. So that's why it's always a practice of good seamanship, and it's actually stated in the safe Code of Practices for Safe Navigational Watch that you come up at night ahead of time to let your eyes adjust. Okay? They say 15 minutes is a good time. That's usually enough time to get your night vision. Okay? Oh, here's a one right here. Any prescription spectacles should be worn and kept clean. There's also a regulation under Marine Personnel Regs that we're going to talk about next year in GSK. If you require a prescription glasses or prescription contacts, you have to have 2 pairs with you at all times. It's a rule. It's in the regulations. Sunglasses and or peak caps may cut down the glare. I've never worn sunglasses on a bridge. Any bridge that will be susceptible to the glare of sunlight will have blinds on it. Okay? You just pull down the blind. That just benefits anyone that is using the bridge. So now, all available means. Okay, so this also encompasses such thing as radar, and VHF radio, and your ECDIS, and your AIS, and binoculars. Okay, anything that's going to help you detect a target, or another ship, or a navigational hazard. Okay. However, it should be noted that carrying a pair of binoculars on board is not a requirement under any existing IMO regulations. Okay, there's no rule out there that says that you have to have binoculars on the bridge. So here's the other thing. I know when we talk about look, sight comes into mind automatically, but it's also by hearing. Okay, so another practice of good seamanship is if you're in restricted visibility, it might be a good practice to put that lookout as far forward on the ship as possible. Okay? If the weather permissions allow it. Because if it's bad weather and he's up there and there's spray coming over the deck or it's raining and snowing, he's not paying attention. He is just worried about getting cover and getting it out of it. So he's distracted now. But if the weather conditions permit, yes, put someone as far forward as possible. Because you could be on a huge vessel, 1,000 feet long. Sound travels. We all know sound travels. So if you got someone forward, he's going to hear it a lot faster and a lot clearer than you will inside of a bridge. Okay? Your watch person, he or she will be up there with a radio. If they hear a fog signal, they'll immediately notify you. Okay? Just going to take a little break here, get a glass of water, and we'll continue with our last rule, Rule 6. Hi, I'm back with a refreshment, just water if you're wondering. So now we're into our last rule in this section, our week 2, and it's safe speed. So there is no defined speed. There are speed limits that you're going to incur throughout your career in different parts of the world and different areas on the Great Lakes. But there's nowhere in the rule that says this is a safe speed. Okay? It's all having to do with the situation that you're in. So we're going to read the rule here, and basically says in determining safe speed, the following factors shall be those taken into account. So they've got it done into 2 sections by all vessels, and then they've got additional considerations by vessels with operational radar. So just a radar. So if you go on a boat without a radar, then I suggest get off it. The school's done a horrible service to you and put you on a boat that shouldn't be sailing. Every boat you go on will have a radar. So in determining a safe speed, the following factors shall be among those taken into account. The state of visibility, okay? How is my visibility? Is it clear? Can I proceed? Do I have a nice clear shot? Do I see like up to 25 nautical miles on the horizon? The traffic density, including concentrations of fishing vessels or other vessels. The maneuverability of the vessel, with special reference to stopping distances. We talked about that earlier, okay? Larger vessels traveling faster are going to take a lot longer to stop than a smaller vessel, okay? Turning ability in prevailing conditions, okay? It's going to take you a lot longer to turn around if you have wind and waves acting in the direction in which you want to turn. When I was in the Grand Banks, we would always use the wind and the waves to aid us in our turn, okay? At night, the presence of background lights, such as from shore lights and from backscatter of our own vessels. So that's those lights I talked about last week in radar. Your deck lighting, okay? You can't have your deck lighting so that it's going to interfere with your night vision. The state of wind, sea, current, and the proximity of navigational hazards. The draft, very important, the draft in relation to the available depth of water. And now part B, additional by vessels with operational radar. The characteristics, efficiency, and limitations of the radar equipment. Any constraints imposed by the radar range scale in use. The effect of the radar detection of sea state, weather and other sources of interference. The big one for this is if you get into ice-infested waters. Smaller icebergs, which are called growlers or bergy bits, are very hard to detect. Okay, they, what we say, do not give a good radar target, so they don't give off a good echo. Okay, the radio wave will just bounce right off it. Okay, the possibility that small vessels, ice, and floating objects may not be detected by radar at adequate range. The location, number, and movement of vessels detected by the radar. The more exact assessment of visibility that may be possible when radar is used to determine the range of vessels or other objects in the vicinity. So the next couple of slides we're going to get into a little discussion about these. So this is another rule with Canadian modifications, okay? Very important. Just a heads up, a little hint, I do test this a lot. I do try to squeeze this in on a lot of the tests because you guys are mostly going to be sailing in Canadian waters using these Canadian modifications. So you're going to see that I have a lot of these on my tests, okay? So in Canadian waters of a roadstead, harbor, river, lake, or inland waterway, every vessel passing another vessel or work that includes a dredge, tow, ground a vessel or wreck shall proceed with caution at a speed that will not adversely affect the vessel or work being passed, and shall comply with any relevant instruction or direction contained in the Notice of Mariners or Notice of Shipping. So if you are, so this is, let's think about a narrow, you're on a river, St. Clair River, Detroit River, or something like that, and you see that there's a vessel off to either side of that river. You're going to proceed with caution so that you're not going to cause big waves and disrupt the work that's being done. And even to another fact, you're going to notice when you're sailing on the lakes and you're in the river and you look across to the U.S. side, there's a lot of nice properties there. A lot nicer than what we see on our side. So you're going to see all these beautiful piers and these docks, and tied up to these docks are some very, very expensive boats. And the last thing you want to do is to tick off one of these owners of these vessels, because it's happened in the past. This wake will send this boat crashing into the dock, or actually sometimes the waves are so big it'll bust the moorings, the ropes securing this vessel to the dock, and then it's set adrift. Okay, so you shall proceed with a caution at a speed that will not adversely affect the vessel or work being passed. Goes on to say, for the purpose of paragraph C, when it cannot be determined with certainty that a passing vessel will not affect another vessel or work described in that paragraph, the passing vessel shall proceed with caution at a minimum speed at which she can be kept on course. Very important. Remember this last sentence, okay? The passing vessel shall proceed with caution at a minimum speed at which she can be kept on course. What's the sense of slowing down to the point where now you can't hold your heading? Now you're not in control anymore of where this vessel is going. You're not under command. But if you cannot determine if you're going to affect this vessel or the work that this vessel is doing, slow down. Proceed with caution at a minimum speed at which you can be kept on your course. So now getting into the international side of it, this rule is another one of the important rules. Paragraphs A and B and their subparagraph are self-explanatory. Okay, so like I said, just listing all vessels and then vessels with radars. However, the main body of the rule may need some further explanation. So every vessel, let's get into that. This point may have special significance with respect to constrained by or draft or restricted ability to maneuver, which may not be justified in maintaining a high speed when other vessels are in close proximity because of their limited maneuverability. So what you're saying here is, okay, just because you under the special circumstances, either constrained by your draft or restricted ability to maneuver, you can't just go off proceeding at a high speed because you know that everyone else is going to have to get out of your way. That will not hold up in court if this causes a collision. Okay, so you still have to keep in mind your maneuverability. Okay, so you also have to proceed at a safe speed. Everyone has to proceed at a safe speed. Safe speed, this is intended to be used in relative sense. If the ship is involved in the collision, it doesn't necessarily follow that she was going too fast. In clear visibility, collisions can generally be attributed to a bad lookout or to wrong decisions and actions subsequent to detection rather than to a high speed. So I just want to talk about that. The best way to avoid a collision is to never put yourself in that circumstances in the first place. If you're conducting a watch and doing your due diligence as a navigation officer, then a collision should never happen. Okay? But what happens if for some reason you do miss this target, and now it's time, you have to decide. My advice is, like someone once said to me, don't be that person that presses 100 buttons in 1 minute. Take 1 minute to press that one right button. Okay? So early detection is the best. Do your due diligence. Have your lookout posted. Have your radar set on the proper ranges for the prevailing circumstances and detect that target so you never have to have a close quarter situation. At all times, a relatively high speed might be accepted as being initially safe for a vessel under radar and restricted visibility in open waters, provided prompt action can be taken to bring the speed down when radar information shows it to be necessary. Okay? So if what they're saying here is, yes, you might be in restricted visibility, but if you're confident you got your radar set up, you got your lookout, then just because of restricted visibility doesn't always necessarily mean you have to slow down. It's expected that you do. It is another one of these practices of good seamanship. It's just like driving your car. Why would you be driving your car at high speeds in restricted visibility? A snowstorm, fog, hail, anything. Okay? It's the same thing. Just apply a lot of this for those of you who do drive. Some of you might not be driving yet, but for those of you who do drive, you can apply a lot of the rules of the road that you adhere to on land to the ones that you have on water. So remember, as an officer to watch, the engines are also at your disposal, and you do not necessarily have to call the master first. Okay, so this is a big misconception you get with a lot of the older captains. I'm the captain of the ship. This is an autocratic vessel you're on. It's not democratic. Do not touch the helm. Do not change course without letting me know. Well, think about the time. If you've got a close quarters situation, think about the time you're going to lose having to call this master, having to get him up on the bridge, having him have to appraise the situation. It might be too late, right? We talked about before. You had 6 seconds. 6 seconds in some situations with high-speed vessels, right? Especially if you're traveling towards each other. The helm is there for you to use. Okay? If you need to reduce or stop your speed to assess or avoid a collision, you do so. Because remember what we said at the end of the day. By all means, you were there to avoid a collision, causing harm to the ship, the environment, and most importantly, the personnel on board. So, but if you can, yes, get the master up there. That's what he's there for. You're going to see that when it comes to all these things, if you are ever in doubt, call the master. And if you can, it says right here, let the engine room know. Okay? Because it's hard on the engines. You're going to see if you go slacken the speed or increase the speed quickly, then it is hard on the engines, and you're going to be getting a call from the engine room. They're going to be wanting to know what's on the go. Could you have alerted them ahead of time? So in order to maintain a safe speed at all times, a continuous appraisal of changes in circumstances and conditions should be made, and any necessary alteration of speed must be instantly and put into effect. Okay? So you have to, that's why it's so important to precisely assess the situation before you make any decision. Yes, reduce your speed, because first thing that's going to do is going to give you more time to assess that situation. Okay? Proper and effective action. A vessel may be unable to take proper and effective action due to the speed being too high, or in some circumstances too low. Okay, so you're going too fast. It doesn't matter now anyway. No matter what you do, you reduce that speed, you're still going to have a collision. Or if you're going too slow, as I mentioned before, you can't stay on course. You're losing your heading because you're not going fast enough. Okay? So like I said, there's no set speed. But if you have to travel at a speed where if a situation does come up, you can take proper and effective action. There are some acronyms which may help you remember the order of important words in both paragraphs A and B. So there are a lot listed there you see on that one slide if you can come up with some way to remember them. But again, it's like all the rules. I'm hoping, I'm not looking for verbatim, but pretty close to it. And like I said here, these are better discussed in class or on board a vessel rather than printed. So again, I'm just putting out these videos to help aid you, and these little descriptions to help aid you when you're trying to, because a lot of this material is using that vocabulary that we talked about in seamanship, right? It's all going to come to you eventually, but I'm here to ease the transition. So I hope you got something out of this video, and I hope it works because it's a long one. And again, if you have any questions, you can email me. So after you've gone through this video, go through it a couple of more times. You've got the advantage now of pausing it, replaying it if you weren't sure or missed something I said. But again, you are responsible for learning these. I cannot make you or help you learn them. You've got to dig in and learn these on your own. So read through it. It's just 3 rules. And following, when you're feeling comfortable, just go on ahead and click on the assessment, the test, just like we had last week. Okay? Thanks. I'll see you guys in class on Friday.